Hi, it's Lynn Watts here with Wyatt the Wonder Dog Books, and I'm going to be talking about the important topic of listening. So, there wasn't a year that went by that I didn't take at least one, if maybe not more, classroom lessons on listening. And why is that? Well, obviously, I think listening is a very important skill in school, but it's also a very important skill for life in general. And a lot of times we just assume that kids should know how to listen. And like many other behaviors, some kids just naturally get it. And other kids, it helps to have more of a step by step process to know what they need to do and why listening is even important. Certainly, kids hear adults around them say, listen, stop doing that. Listen, are you listening? I'm sure they hear that many times, but what does that actually mean? So I think doing a whole lesson on listening helps kids understand more about it. So, why is listening important? Well, obviously, in school, it's going to be hard to learn anything if you're not listening. I think that's probably just a given. Another reason that listening is very important is listening develops relationships. So, whenever a relationship has a problem or goes bad, what do people always say was the problem? Lack of communication, right? And listening is part of that communication piece. I'm sure that as a counselor, you probably took, I know I did, a whole class just on communication skills, and a great deal of it was spent learning to listen, doing role plays, listening to what the person said, repeating it, paraphrasing it back to them. That famous phrase, what I hear you saying is, all of that. That is great information, not just for people who are going to have a whole career in communicating with others, but for anybody who wants to develop a good relationship. So, learning to be a good listener is the first piece. Learning to be a good listener also helps children, adults, anyone have empathy for the other person. If you don't listen to what they say, if you don't take the time to really understand it, then it's hard to be empathetic and it's easy to make judgments and assumptions if you're not listening. When we listen to someone, we know how to respond appropriately to what they say. All right. And it also becomes a part of learning critical thinking. So part of listening should be also thinking of what's a question I could ask? How can I express interest about this? What else could I learn? What else do I need to know? So there's a lot involved in listening beyond just the simple kind of things that we think about initially. So I thought listening was so important that, first of all, I wrote a book called Wyatt Learns About Listening. And in the book, Wyatt, of course, has a problem with listening. And I think it's kind of a humorous book because, in addition to his problem with listening, a lot of it illustrates not only how to listen, but a lot of the problems that can happen if you don't listen, like showing up at a costume party and not knowing you had to have a costume, which happens to him in the book. So you can certainly use that book as a lead in to talking about listening. And then if you want to do some activities in the classroom to follow up on that, or even without the book or using another type of picture book, I have a section in Stories to Learn By all about the listening book and particular activities that you can do. And some of them are games that, quite honestly, we used to play when I was a kid. I don't know if anybody thinks about them much, but the game of Simon Says, that's a listening game. All right. So you can play games with kids and help them develop listening skills. And that certainly makes classroom activities and lessons more interesting. I also have a separate listening lesson in my new uh, lesson plans for school counselor book, volume 2. Volume 1 has listening in it too. I mean, I have listening in every one of them, but this has some new activities and new ideas, things you can do. And a lot of them do involve role play, which with older kids is a great way to help them develop better listening, communication skills, use some critical thinking skills, develop some empathy. You can really advance the lesson and teach a lot of more than just listening as you start working with older kids. So I would say always start with the younger kids. I also always talk about body language. And if you're listening, then you're looking at the person, being observant of their body language as well. So there's lessons in here. I do want to mention a lot of times people will say, but teaching listening to neurodivergent students, what does that mean? And I think certainly you take into consideration what a child is capable of. So certainly if a child is not capable of making eye contact, there are things, and you may have to just simply talk to them. How do you listen best? And kind of get to the root of, and maybe you do some observation and see how they seem to listen best. So maybe eye contact is not the thing for them. But for the average student that you're working with in a classroom who doesn't have a diagnosis such as autism, something like that, then I think we have to teach them the social skills and the skills that they need to be good listeners, and not assume that simply telling them to listen is going to be the magic formula for getting them to be good listeners. So, understanding how to do it, understanding the benefits of it, and in particular, practicing listening in several different ways is an important part of any listening lesson. So, as always, I want to thank you so much for all that you do for young children. And thanks, as always, for listening.